think it was glitchy. I don't know. Maybe I entered the wrong way. I'm not sure. So I don't know what happened there. I did the thing I do every week. So
No worries.
right. Let's see who we got here now. Participants. Okay, attendees. Lou. Let's see.
You are not the host. I'm going to make you the
Yeah,
host.
that's why I can't click up anything. So I don't know what happened there.
There you go. You should have all the controls now.
I am the host now. Okay, got it. And Lou, just click out a thing that you're joining, whatever it says you're joining. Okay, you got it. All right, thank you. Ray. Okay. Matt. Okay, Roger. Okay.
Hey Julian, long time no see. How you doing?
Are you up to
Good.
break?
Have you seen an ophthalmologist, Ray?
Ah, that's fun.
Sorry. All right.
If
There
that
we
were a joke, that would be average. Okay.
go. Okay, good. Let's see Rob below. Okay.
Oh my God, almost done with first year. That's amazing.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Okay. Chat. Let's see what the chat says. Jeremiah. Hey, Jeremiah, I need to ask you a question as I get you on. I'm great. 2 weeks left of my first year school. Okay, good. Fantastic. Okay. Hey, Jeremiah, just wanted to ask you, are you going to be able to come to the meeting in June? Because you're one of the people I was supposed to be calling to say we haven't heard from you yet.
Uh, sorry, I'm outside of my porch with some construction, but negative. No, I can't.
Okay. Sorry about that then. Okay, too bad. You'd really have a great time. All right. So good. We're getting there. It's gonna be, there's a lot of people that are out today. Jim Augustine, if it's not a HIPAA violation, is in the dental chair, right? And then Glenn is going to be attending a funeral. We're going to have Lou Steinberg talk about that in a second. And I could go on and on. Crawford's doing a FIFA thing, and so it's going to be probably a relatively small attendance today, but we'll see how this goes in the next little while. Um, and let's see and then I got to even look at I'm going to look at my own. I'm on the road myself, so I got to look at my own agenda that I wrote up. So okay, uh, Lou, let's just wait a couple more minutes for more people to join, probably within the next 2 or 3 minutes. I like to do that if that's okay with you. Okay, so
No problem. I'm here.
yeah. So that was a great conversation just now, and I absolutely, I think did you hear my comments that I absolutely agree with that? Should, just from day one, when I remember when I was wearing, I had camera people on me and had a microphone on, no matter where I was, it really does improve your behavior. There's no question. So.
Everyone's first reaction is the same until it bails them out once.
Oh God, yeah, because it does bail them out. I'm going to tell you so many times. Just for everybody else's purposes, we were talking about body cameras, and that I think it's just a really a great thing that we should be doing more often. That kind of thing. It will bail us out, that kind of thing. So. Uh, unless you're what's the word looking for what are they called, the ICE agents, the new trainees, that kind of thing. Yeah, so we got to just make sure people understand that. In there, the thing that is what's really kind of cool is, as I was saying, there are video cameras everywhere, whether they're out on some building across the street or everybody with their, pulling their cell phones out to record it and whatever you're doing. And so just a good thing to make sure you know. And even let's say if you get to a scene where someone was decapitated, so that's the end of that, and everybody else is arriving, then you see someone and you haven't seen for a while, and you look like, hey, how are you? And you look like you're having a good time there. It could be misinterpreted, that kind of thing. So it's just so many reasons why the truth is the truth, and the truth will set you free, as you were just intimating there, so which is really great. All right. Well, it looks like we at this point in time, maybe, like I said, a low number today for a lot of reasons. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. But Lou, go ahead. One of the reasons why, um, you know, Glenn Asada is on every single week, just about, except when he's out seeing his mom in San Francisco. He's out today because one of their docs that does online medical direction for them, suddenly died. And well, he did suddenly. He had a bad brain tumor. Lou, if you don't mind, why don't you tell him a little bit about what happened to him, and then tell us a little bit about his background and why we want to honor him real quickly. And you put something in the chat as well, correct?
Yes, so there's a link to the obituary, and there is an online webcast of the funeral this afternoon, I believe at 2 o'clock. I probably can't do as much good as the obituary does, but I'll try. So I was the fire chief in the next town. He was a member of the Stony Brook Fire Department. He was a family and emergency physician. He was actually my family physician for years. He was also a field medical control physician in Suffolk County on Long Island. He was a New York City medical control physician, probably one of the best diagnosticians I'd ever met. He could pick up stuff. He did a little bit of everything, maybe too much sometimes, but he was diagnosed recently with glioblastoma, which is obviously not a great outcome, but he was doing fairly well. The day before he died, he actually had just gotten a radiation treatment, and people who saw him said he seemed okay. He wound up at 5:30 in the morning in cardiac arrest, suspected bleed, either from the tumor or the treatment, one or the other or both.
Yeah.
And he died at Stony Brook University Hospital at about 6 on Wednesday morning.
Okay, yeah, that's fantastic. You did kind of do him justice. Like anything, when you have to briefly say something about it, it sort of trivializes an amazing career into some respect. But you hit it on the nose when you say being a great diagnostician, and I think that's a real tribute because that's so important. To have that sixth sense, that spidey sense, some people say, I think is an incredibly important attribute to have. And so we're sorry to lose him. How old was he, Lou?
He was only 69 years old.
Uh,
And on a personal note, I'm a diagnostician. He had diagnosed me with cancer 35 years ago. Obviously, caught it very early and did well, or I wouldn't be talking to you. And suspected it was a firefighter related thing, which we didn't know back in the 90s.
yeah.
Now we know better. It probably was, but just a good guy overall. Also a big ham radio operator. A lot of people know him through that too.
Oh, really? Okay. Interesting. And what kind of cancer was it?
It was glioblastoma.
No, but I'm saying 35 years ago or whatever it was. What
Oh,
was
mine, testicular.
it was? Okay, got it. Yeah, so I'm glad they did catch it and glad you're still with us, which is good. All right. Let's move on then to the today's agenda today. Two things I want to get through is first of all, let me see if I can send this over to everybody there. Let me see if I can get on the chat here. Where's the chat? There we go. Host to panelists. Okay, there is a article. Let me share then. I guess that's the best way to do this. Let me pull it up. But yesterday in the Journal of Trauma, there was a new message. Let me see if I can pull this up from Don. John Jenkins sent this to me. He's at a meeting. There, a lot of our folks that are usually on are at a meeting right now in Washington, D.C. on the economics of blood in the field. And I'm trying to pull up my own thing. So let me see if I can find Don's thing. Okay, here we go. And this was a article, if I can slip it in from my published today. Let me see if I can move this over to yep, I think I can get it on. There we go. So anyways, what he said was the title of the talk is Aggressive Calcium Chloride Dosing Reduces Early Mortality. And that's what's in there. So hopefully I'm sending that out to you folks right now. Return. Hope I did it. I'm not sure if I did it or not. We'll see. It's hosting and panelists. Okay, here we go. There we go. Hopefully you'll get it. So I asked him if he would be able to present it to us today, but it turns out that, since he was busy in the meeting, he'll maybe do it next week. But I thought I'd give you guys a head start since it's fresh off the table and I wanted to get it out to you as soon as possible. So, all right. So anybody else that has to get off early? Mick, you have to get off early. Anything to report out of Ireland before we go on to Eileen?
No, the fuel protests seem to have scaled back a little bit. We don't have proper fuel supply yet into the country, so we're still a little bit short.
Yeah.
but it just doesn't kick off again. I know it's happening in some other European countries now. It seems to have escalated out, and the straits are blocked again. So fuel is going to be very tricky over here.
Yeah. So specifically, a lot of us are interested in the MS violence, but also it happens in the emergency department. Ray Fowler, tell us about the time you almost got shot, right? You remember that? You want to tell us what's that story, Ray?
It's the availability of weapons in the emergency department, especially with cops. They've got these things hanging off their hips. And that's what we saw, and when, suddenly a guy grabs a cop's gun and the shot fires and all of us hit the floor, several bullets come, surging through the nurse's station. I mean, that was it was a night to have a good stiff drink and go home.
Yeah, you're averting PTSD, right? Okay,
I had a bit of that, yeah.
But Ray, you were one of the people that brought the guy down. That's why I wanted to salute you for that, right?
Well, the guy goes rolling by and on the floor with a cop, and he's got the gun in his hand, and it suddenly occurs to me that the safest place might be on top of him. That's a true story. And so I go flying off. I got my white coat on, and Paul, I got my white coat on, and I go flying off the floor like this. And I know my white coat was like a cape like this.
Yeah.
Fowler in his cape. Anyway, we got.
I was what do you call? I was as the chief of the emergency department. I was responsible for looking that over, and so we just kind of shake our heads because Ray was did it again. He was just, it was great. But I think everybody else, a lot of those folks who are on the call right now are dealing with, and there's various things we've done, back in the days, or even still currently, this is still happening, all that. And then Mick, can you tell us what kind of things you're dealing with, and today what you're up to?
So I have to do an interview for the media today because of the increase in violence in EDs at the moment, and it's actually gone back to the waiting room because it's the delays to get into some emergency rooms are significant. So I've had probably 5 assault cases against, or that the hospital are supposed to be taken from me, against people who've assaulted me in the last year. Now, who would choose to assault a 6'4", 290-pound rugby player? I don't know, but these guys still keep coming, and I keep putting them down. But can do it.
Yeah, hang on for a second. I've got my phone going off, and I didn't mean to do that. So what are you gonna? What's your pitch? What are you gonna say? Is there, is it the National Health Service doing something about it, or who's in charge? Is it law enforcement?
Well, that's the thing. So we don't have law enforcement within departments. We do have a dual role orderly / security person, but they tend to be doing more of the medical role rather than the security role because there's so much medical things they've got to do at night. So really, they got to bump up the staffing across the board. If they move the patients up to the house into hospital beds, there'll be more flow coming through and less aggression in the waiting room. So that's kind of going to be the message.
Yeah.
They got to protect the staff. I mean, they got to stand up for the staff. I mean, a lot of the time, you hear the conversation in the media going, well, the doctors and nurses should expect this violence. You shouldn't. You shouldn't have to go to work and expect this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. Well, so what is your main point? What's your soundbite going to be that you'd like to get across?
Soundbite. We did so the role I have now, I'm the your AMA equivalent. I'm the chair, so I speak on all this kind of stuff now in the country. So we did a mental health and well-being survey among our respondents last year, and 65% of those who replied had been exposed to verbal abuse, and 25% to physical violence. So
wow.
We need to cut that down.
Yeah. Hey, Eileen, before you put it up and share, I just want to make sure we have a couple more minutes that we want to do some talking. All right, and then hey, anybody else have an anecdote they can report about what they went through?
Is it okay if I leave it up because I'm
amazed that it actually worked. I've had so much trouble getting
Okay,
powerful.
yeah, okay. For all those who don't mind, we're going to leave it up then for that sake. Okay, Eileen, we understand. Hey, how about anybody else out there had specific events that they were involved with, or and what you learned from it? Anyone else? Yeah. Well, okay. If not, I'm
Hey,
surprised.
Paul. Hey,
Yes, yes,
Paul. Yeah,
yes.
this is Charlie. I put about the Grady incident when Slovis and I were there, but yeah, I learned to duck very fast. That's what I learned.
Yeah. Okay, got it. Hey, John Jew, what were you writing about in the chat?
Yeah. We have public safety officers who are actually sworn in our ED. Sworn being they have a badge and or a gun and that kind of sworn. Sorry about the
Yeah.
a word choice here. They are very helpful for two real reasons. Number one, when you actually it could be a harm as well as a benefit when you have a person that's uniformed and
Yes.
basically it looks like a police officer's. A good portion of our patients will actually calm down and back off. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
On the other hand, a good portion of our patients will actually get aggravated and basically escalate. So it's a double-edged sword. When there is
Oh,
physical violence, they are very protective of the family. Does that make? And they will move very quickly. So we've had multiple incidences of potential violence that were basically prevented,
yeah.
unfortunately, without Ray. Our major problem is in our trauma. Unfortunately, in Europe, there was a very, I would say, strict gun control. And U.S. is, they're all over the place. In our trauma system patients, sometimes they're not searched correctly, and the Glock falls out of the pants, and
Yes.
everybody sort of stops and looks at the paramedics, and the paramedics say, "Well, the cops told me he was searched." A little bit
Yes.
embarrassing as well.
Well,
So that's
one of
happened to
my
me multiple times.
one of my favorites was like that was when we got the X-ray, there was a gun underneath in the back, right? That you
Yeah.
could see, which
When I was doing a ride along about 4 years ago, we had this motorcycle rider about 40 years old. He was down and out, and I was with my Australian paramedic students. They were very good, and then we got to basically got to the scene, examined him. He had a Glock and a basically a 5 or 6 inch Bowie knife in his pants. It's like so I grabbed the Glock, put it aside, grabbed the
yeah,
Bowie knife, put it aside, and the look on the Australian paramedic's face, she was just astounded.
yeah,
That's something that they'd never seen before. It's like, oh, this is normal. Because you got a, obviously a guy with a head injury and reach for his gun, you have no idea what's going on. But that's a story of United States here in North America. Back to you,
yeah.
Paul.
One of the things that I wanted to point out with Ray's case and what Roger just brought up is that we got to do better trainings with those public safety officers because the guns can be taken away and they've been used. That's part of the issue, even if you didn't have officers there. But even if you do have officers there, that's the other issue as well. All right, well, whatever. Yeah, there's been yeah. So I just wanted to, since that's what Mick was up to, I just wanted to just have a little offshoot chat. Anybody else have any experiences to report?
Can
So,
I report a funny experience about guns?
Sure. Anything involving guns that's funny. I'd like to hear this one. Okay, good.
Well, I was working in the emergency
Oh, I'm so
department.
sorry, everybody. But go ahead.
I was working in the emergency department, and all of a sudden, there's a woman that comes in and insists on being seen, and she's she's being held arm in arm on either side, and
Yeah.
she's shouting at the top of her lungs, "I've been shot! Been shot! I've been shot!" Just like that. Okay,
Yeah.
and you see an entrance wound here and an exit wound here, and she's walking. Entrance wound, exit wound. It was a 22. It bounced underneath this, bounced on her skull, went underneath the skin, and came out the other side. I just thought I'd share that as a amazing gun experience. Not my personal injury, but
Okay. And Bill, what were you reporting here?
So I was taking care of a gunshot victim on a gurney, and a voice behind me said, "Step away." I turned around, and someone was holding a shotgun aimed at the patient. I stepped away, and he fired and killed the patient on the
Uh,
gurney.
it's-
He had come in through hospital security. I always check in the ER to make sure there's some security there.
yeah.
And he had had a gun duel with the security guy, and then that's how he was able to advance into the patient care area.
Well, for our purposes too, for EMS, if we think it's bad in the emergency department and where we do have often security and sometimes a lot of places will have even, the like our place, you have to go through a magnetometer and things like that. A big issue for me is de-escalating things as well. And so that's why I think some of the CIT training that police officers are doing that Joe Holly can tell us about, I think we need to bring it to we also need to bring it to the paramedics as well. Joe, can you give us like a 30-second blip about what your experience has been with CIT training for the police officers, for example, on scene, and how that could apply to the medics?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. So Paul's referencing our crisis intervention team training for law enforcement that incorporates a EMS response, a social services, mental health worker, and a law enforcement response with a lot of very focused training on de-escalation, et cetera, that has been fairly successful here in Memphis, despite our ongoing issue with violence here. But it does appear that it's made a moderate impact anyway, and is currently our mayor is pushing on us for a substantial broadening of that program to provide not only more people, but an even more aggressive response there.
Okay, so what I was going to say is that if you could remind me, I think that might be a nice topic to bring up when we get to Fort Lauderdale. I think we really should be having more of our folks trained in it as well, because it makes a major difference, I think, in terms of things can really escalate if we have an attitude going in, just like the police had in the past, right? So,
Completely agree. That's a great idea, Paul.
okay, good. Remind me though. All right. Hey, Bill, before I go over to Eileen, you sent me a note about, and I can't remember about someone joining the Eagles. Well, I mean, you're here, you're joining the Eagles, you're here, or de facto. And we don't think of ourselves as an organization. We're just who we are. And in fact, it's sort of a antithesis of us to think that we have dues or officers or whatever, and mission statements. We're just who we are. So bottom line is that but I wanted to see what you were talking about and what you were trying to represent there.
No, I was just saying that we now are bringing in fire and rescue for around the Lake Tahoe area, which represents 70,000 year-round residents, but over 300,000 seasonal residents that are here. And we've now got 131 community organizations that are all participating in what I had sent you earlier on why fires are our fire and emergency service program.
Okay, good. And if you want, you could do a presentation on this and then have John Jew make a commentary because he's been a medical director for the Forest Service. John, hey, what's your official title there?
Lima, I think local emergency medicine advisor or whatever. It's by the way, for Mick and our European colleagues, for the first time, the wildland fire medical community support has been integrated into a national program. And so there is a national set of standards and whole 9 yards supporting the medical support for wildland fires. The U.S. Forest Service, BLM, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not sure if Europe has that or if Australia has that, but it's pretty good. And it's, frankly, we're literally all off the same book, same set of protocols and the same organization. So that's what's going on right now. So a lot of the issue here for us in the medical wildland fire is basically prevention with the P2.5 particles and the whole 9 yards, as well as trauma
Yes.
occurring on the fire line. Back to you, Paul, but there is
Yeah.
significant advances, but the Forest Service got reorganized, and I'm just rolling my eyes right now. There's some politics behind that. Back to you.
Yeah, you've been doing this for a long time. And John, what was or what is your title with the Forest Service then?
I'm a basically a local medical director, but I'm in charge of the Region 6 incident medical specialists,
Yes.
and that's a IMS program, and that's basically providing medical support for basically type 1 and type 2 medical teams that are national.
Tell them where Region 6 is, by the way.
Yeah, Region 6 is Pacific Northwest is Washington and Oregon and part of Western Idaho.
Yeah. So both for Mick and for Dr. Balmer, I just wanted to say is that John is a great asset for you as you go forward with that. And Mick was looking for some protocols, John, just so you're aware of that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, Mick, I'll put the set of protocols and it's on the web. I'll find it in a second. You can actually download it.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, Bill, thank you so much. And so I don't know if I should say condolences or congratulations on your new appointment, right? But have fun in that area. Anybody else has to get off here pretty soon, etc. Hey, Ray Fowler, I make sure I talk to you this afternoon because I want to make sure I have some plans for you, and I want you to come to Fort Lauderdale in June. Okay? So
Okay, we'll talk.
Good. Hey, Dave Miramontes, you're the DR in the DR, aren't you? That's great that you're on. I just wanted to say hi real quickly, right? You were able to converse with us, okay?
Yes, estamos en vacación en Dominica República in Punta Cana.
Fantastic.
The rum, Paul, the rum here is fantastic. That's all I got to say.
Okay. I was out at Diosa last night, right? And I couldn't believe the police presence is amazingly strong. They do a lot of commitment. I couldn't walk 4 feet without running into a police officer there. And then you had your medics there. I saw one Lieutenant Green maybe walking around. Does that sound familiar to you?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. So I didn't say hi or anything. I didn't want to be too obnoxious, but it was just just pretty impressive about how you guys have that one, I think, booked. And the other reason why I want to be complimentary is that I saw people up in police SWAT teams up in the parking lot areas and the higher levels of the village, the Vieta. And they were doing all the right things, being able to see if you got a sniper, if you got, it was just really well done. I could tell just the infrastructure. So wanted to give a shout out to SAPD and SAFD, that kind of thing as well. So
what you didn't see was the federal presence and the ATF.
Yeah.
There's also a JHAT team and a hazmat crew. They're actually monitoring for radiation. So you didn't see any of that because they're all undercover. And the cops you saw in uniform are just a fraction of the cops that were there. So we had a shooting a couple years ago at Market Square. So and that is one of the biggest sources of revenue for some of those not-for-profits that are all those booths where you bought food are not-for-profits getting money for the coming year's budget. So it's a big deal for the city. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed yourself. Chicken on a stick and all that stuff.
What we're big on, because of my son, is like the chief city planner for the city of Dallas. As you know, he used to do that in San Antonio, and what they're saying is the conservation aspect of that, the preservation of the of the city and all that. It's a very cool thing. So anybody ever gets a chance to come down to Fiesta here, as they say, or NIOSA is Night in Old San Antonio, just so everybody knows what that means. And there are just 1,000 booths there of different food. There's a Chinatown, there's an Irish town, what do they call it? Irish Flats or something like that. And then there's Germantown. There's all sorts of international food there, and it's a delightful evening. And I'll have to send David, I have to send you a video of people doing line dancing and or doing the footloose thing. There's a bunch of the young people here are just fantastic. So we had a good time. So all right. Well, I will I guess move on from there, but thank you for being the DR in the DR. Okay, so I love it. And I'm glad you're able to join us today as well. And did you see the thing that Don Jenkins sent me, David, about
I
calcium?
just sent it to a lot of my crews. So that
Okay.
actually is a surprise because the previous study they did showed that hypercalcemia was
Yeah.
actually detrimental to
Yes.
morbidity.
It
So,
may be one of
yeah.
those things I have to drill down and see who is it good for, that it may be specific people and all that. All right, we better get back to Eileen and all that, but thank you very much. Thanks for checking in. And maybe you and maybe you could coordinate that a little bit with Don and get on next week and talk about it. And have them also give a report about the economic summit that they're at as well. Okay. All right. Anybody else have to get off soon? Otherwise, I'm going to go to Eileen right away. And we've sort of talked about this arthropod-borne infections. And of course, I always like to know what defines an arthropod, because I used to cook 600 lobsters a night up in up in Maine years ago. And so the arthropods were very much interesting to me. And that's why I said this thing about don't want to frighten, but we're big on the chitin, right? So can you tell us a little bit about your next sort of phase of education for us?
Sure, I will. But just before we get started, I was so intrigued by the guy with the shotgun that killed the patient right in front of him. And I'm just curious if the guy got away with it, or whether he was murdered. Excuse me, whether the guy who murdered the patient escaped.
Or is this with Bill's case you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I've had situations myself where they did it in the ambulance or that kind of thing, but we did grab them right away. But I assume that they did get him in that case, right, Bill? The person that shot the person right in front of you?
Well, we'll find out later. Okay, let me answer your question as to what is an arthropod. Arthropod is a phylum. It's a humongous group. So it includes many, many different classes. And to put that in perspective, vertebrates are not even a phylum. We're in the phylum Chordata. That also includes things like starfish, right?
Yeah.
So, so if you say arthropod, you're looking at a very high level group. And of course, it includes crabs and lobsters. It also includes insects, which is a class, and it includes arachnids, which is where you have your spiders and your mites and your ticks, right? So arthropod, huge, huge class. Huge phylum with a lot of different members. And so on that note, what do they transmit? All kinds of stuff. DNA viruses, RNA viruses, bacteria, protozoa, helminths, you name it. They can transmit all kinds of things. And when I say helminths, that's a huge group too, because there's a bunch of different phyla that belong to the helminth group. And I'll show you one very funny one and very unusual at the end. But most of the arthropod transmitted pathogens that we worry about are viruses. And nearly every single one of those is an RNA virus. I listed just a couple just to give you an idea about it. But DNA virus is only one that is transmitted by happens to be a tick in humans, and lots of them that can be transmitted to animals. And it's one of the major problems for plants is DNA viruses transmitted by arthropods. Arthropods are the way that plants get a lot of different types of infections.
So let me interrupt you there. That's an important point for me. So you're saying there are DNA viruses that are transmitted generally there. Is that right? Yeah.
To plants, plants and animals. There's only one for humans that's a DNA virus.
Okay, got it. No, because DNA viruses are obviously the worst, big deal. That's a problem.
Yeah. In fact, cowpox is an orthopox virus, like smallpox is so it is transmitted that way.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and obviously, there's a very important protozoa like malaria and leishmania and so forth. So that's one way of looking at it. And just sort of give you an idea, it's always nice to have a visual of some of these different ones. again, we tend to focus on those virally transmitted ones, viral diseases that are transmitted by arthropods. Most of those are transmitted by mosquitoes of various different species. The major mosquitoes are the Aedes mosquitoes and the Culex mosquitoes for viruses. But obviously, malaria is transmitted by a different species, Anopheles, that can also transmit some viruses. It can even transmit a filarial disease, a nematode. No-see-ums, those little no-see-ums that you get at the beach you can't stand, they can give you these really bizarro nematode infections of Mancinella, like Mancinella streptocerca. Ticks, of course, we've talked about before. I won't list the many, many different things, but I've had patients that have had mixed infections from the same ticks of various kinds. Obviously, fleas and plague, deer flies and loa loa, that worm that crawls across your eye, tsetse fly that can give you human African trypanosomiasis or sleeping sickness, the kissing bugs that give you Chagas disease. And we have a big outbreak of Chagas here in South Florida, mostly imported. And then one of my personal favorites is Simulia, because I studied those black flies a lot and did a lot of work with onchocerciasis. So that's sort of a, flyby of huge group of diseases and different things. And so now, what are the major ones worldwide? I'm just going to stick to worldwide. Malaria is still numero uno. And so I thought it might be fun if you guys tried to guess. Whoops, I guess I can't do that. Previous. Okay. So can you see my arrow?
Let's see.
See if anybody wants to play match with me as to which picture represents which disease. They're all represented.
I don't see your arrow right now. Is anybody else seeing her arrow? Interesting. Okay. I don't know.
Was a yes or a no?
No, can't see the arrow.
Okay. All right. Well, okay. So so obviously, man at the top, he's shivering, like you see with malaria, because of various stages thereof. The bullseye, that would be Lyme disease. The rash that you can make sort of disappear by putting your fingers on it, that would be dengue. The little boy with the puffy eye, he's got an early version of Chagas. The hands that have arthritis there, that'd be chikungunya. The fellow with the what's going on with this thing? The fellow with the nasal problem there, I've seen a lot of cases like that. This is one of the cases that we saw at the AFIP when I was doing a lot of work in Latin America, and people would show up with missing nasal septum, et cetera, not from cocaine, but from leishmania, which can cause that. West Nile can cause a rash. It does in about 50% of patients. Obviously, the legs are showing one that has filariasis and one that is not infected. A lot of people don't realize that it isn't the worm per se that leads to the elephantiasis. In fact, people can live with their worm, but it does damage the lymphatic system in such a way that you can get secondary bacterial and fungal infections, and that clogs up the lymphatics, and that leads to the elephantiasis. The jaundice I'm showing you in the eye, classic yellow fever. Obviously, it's not the only thing. Hepatitis can cause it, yada, yada, yada. But yellow fever is called yellow fever, and the name for all the flaviviruses come from the word flavy, which means yellow. So obviously, a big deal there. And then the little boy there with a coma is a real little boy with Japanese encephalitis. So.
That was interesting. There was and I hadn't heard about. I guess I didn't even know about it. Maybe just because in my training they didn't have it. But is that this thing they'll have on TV about mites that get into your eye, right? Like a blepharitis of some sort that you get. Is that common, or is it just another product?
It depends on where you are. And then there's also bot flies. Some of the people from the Gulf War, some of our people got bot fly infections, but those are infestations as opposed to transmissions of disease. So like scabies would be an infestation. Demodex, which many people have, especially people who have rosacea, have tons of these little Demodex mites in their skin, around their nose, etc. Those are infestations.
So those are just infestations versus transmission of disease, is what we were getting at. Yes, okay. Got it.
Yeah, exactly. So again, viruses are a big deal. So just to give you a scope of, we divide them into group A and group B. These are the group A, which are all Togo viruses. All of these are transmitted by mosquitoes, mostly Aedes and Culex mosquitoes, which I just showed you. Some of these will be familiar to you, some of them not. The equine encephalitis viruses like Venezuela equine encephalitis, Eastern and Western, were all part of our biowarfare program when we had one. And we did that with the Brits, as well. They participated in dispersion of these agents in the Caribbean. So it's really fascinating history involving these types of viruses used for biowarfare as incapacitating agent. The arbovirus group B are the flaviviruses, right? So obviously it includes really important viruses that we talk about all the time. Dengue, yellow fever, which is only going up in problems, Zika, West Nile, and Japanese encephalitis are all in that group. Now, most of these type B arboviruses are also transmitted by mosquitoes, also the same one. So really, if we just get rid of the Aedes and the Culex, most of the other mosquitoes are not such a big deal. But 3 of these are actually tick transmitted. So there's some tick transmitted flavivirus infections. And of course, some of these infections can be transmitted by other types of things. I mean, snails can transmit these things. Rodent urine can transmit some of these, et cetera, but we're focused on arthropods. Of course, climate change is a big deal, and it's obviously impacting this. I've shown you guys these slides before. Simply, again, just to remind you that the life cycle of a mosquito changes dramatically as the temperature goes up, so that instead of going from being an egg and all through the larval stages, the pupal stage, and the adult, instead of taking 30 days, can take as little as 6 to 7 days. And that means you have that, and every time that the adult lays eggs, it's going to, depending on the species of mosquito, it's going to lay 50 to 300 different eggs. So you have so many more mosquitoes because of that increase in heat. Also, the heat increases the bite rate. So if they're hot, they're thirstier. The mosquito's more thirsty, so it bites more often. And it needs more blood for its little eggs, which is why it bites us. It's the female that bites for her little eggs. So, that's an important point. And even malaria transmission is affected. There is, of course, an ideal rate at which it affects us the most. Drought and shifts between drought and rain can alter the mosquito population in ways that are very detrimental to us. And it's important to note that, beyond a certain temperature, then even the arthropod doesn't like it either, and it can be detrimental to it. But by then, we're so heat exhaust, and we can talk about heat exhaustion, it becomes a whole other kettle of fish. So that's an important point. Anyway, it definitely is pertinent here. And I've shown you this slide before, and that's just to remind you that not only does it change the vector, but it also changes the dose of the pathogen within the vector. So at very cold temperatures, it takes a lot more days to have a dose at all of the vector in the pathogen, of the pathogen in the vector. But once you get to very high temperatures, you can see that the amount of virus, for example, is very high in very little time. And so when you're bitten in higher temperatures, you're going to get a higher dose, and it takes less time for that higher dose to accumulate in the mosquito. And so that's a big factor in seeing actual disease from this. So dengue, as you know, there's 4 flavors. The big problem here, and we've talked about dengue before, is when you have cross immunity causing antibody enhancement of the disease. And so antibody to the wrong, say you had 1 and then you have 2, so you have antibodies to 1, but now you have 2. Those antibodies to 1 don't help you. They give you antibody-dependent enhancement of the disease, and you're much more likely to have severe dengue and require hospitalization. And, obviously I could have picked 1 and 3 or 2 and 3 or 2 and 4 or whatever, but that cross immunity is a big deal. And so we know that one mosquito can lead to multiple infected persons. Of course, there's an incubation period between the time the mosquito bites and the time that it's able to transmit. We just talked a little bit about that. And of course, it isn't just by mosquitoes in which you can transmit these things. Here's on the blue side is the current dengue classifications. Obviously, what we worry about in the emergency area is severe dengue, where you can have severe plasma leakage, severe bleeding in some instances, and real serious impairment of organ functions, with the classical course being an incubation period of 3 to 14 days. Then they're viremic, at which point the mosquito can bite and then share it with others eventually, and also transmit it from mother to child in the mosquito, right? So we have that kind of transmission. So an infected female mosquito, all her eggs that she's laying are infected as well. And then we get into the febrile phase, and then you're either gonna head for convalescence or you're gonna get critical. And obviously, it takes an entire lecture to go into the details on what happens at each phase, and we have talked about it before. So I'm just throwing this back at you so you remember. Here are the various ways in which the dengue rash can manifest. It can be a sudden flushing. You can have petechial hemorrhages, and it changes over time as the rash defervesces. Okay. One more disease to talk about quickly is Zika, right, which was a big deal back in 2016 here, where we were starting to see cases of this in the United States. This is one of my patients that I saw actually on a MedReady, when I went with the military to it was Honduras. And it's just, it's just incredibly, incredibly sad. I won't go into
that was a microcephaly that occurred, right?
That's microcephaly, exactly.
Yeah.
Yellow fever is still a problem. That's why you need yellow fever vaccine. We were very short on yellow fever vaccine for a while there, partly because the Swiftwater plant that the Pasteur Institute had in Pennsylvania was closed down for renovations. And that led, believe it or not, to a new policy on you only need to have it once in your life as opposed to every 10 years. You do have some protection if you've had it once in your life. You are better off if you get that booster shot for all the usual immunologic reasons. This is just to show you the extensive liver damage. Apoptosis is very obvious. Those dark pink cells are dying cells in the liver. It's just what you see. In terms of malaria, we're now working with 5 species. I was not long ago in Borneo, where they have a big problem with Plasmodium nalauzi, which is not a Plasmodium species that is well known in the Western Hemisphere, but it is well known in Southeast Asia. And unlike the others, it has a 24-hour cycle. So these people get sick very quick, and they can get very, very sick from nalauzi. So that's the mosquito that transmitted. Malaria is a big killer. It tends to be overdiagnosed. I've seen cases that were diagnosed with malaria that, in fact, because they had the parasite in their blood, they thought they had cerebral malaria, and in fact, they had a meningitis that went undiagnosed because of finding the Plasmodium in the blood and not doing the appropriate tests. So I won't go into that too much. I know I'm getting a little, just to show you some fun pictures. Here's cerebral malaria. Here's cerebral malaria. And each of those little dots that you see in the capillaries there are actually malarial parasites in red blood cells in capillaries of the brain. And of course, you can get hypersplenia from malaria. And you can obviously find malarial parasites in the bloodstream anywhere in the body. So it's going to affect everything. You can get non-cardiogenic pulmonary edema, and it can be extremely life-threatening as well. Malaria is one of those diseases that have a variety of different presentations, not just your classic fever pattern that we're familiar with. And non-immune persons that get inappropriately treated or such can end up with black water fever, which is also something that's very deadly. Moving over to a different parasite, a different protozoa. This is
Before you go
Leishmaniasis.
further, why is it called black water fever?
The color.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Did you want to go into the
Oh,
details?
that was it. I just wanted to make sure I understood what that meant, where that came from. But go ahead. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. This is transmitted by a sandfly, not by a mosquito. It is a protozoan. I already showed you how the mucocutaneous can look. There's also visceral leishmaniasis, which is incredibly dangerous. We can make these diagnoses on the fly. And this is one of the reasons we like doing these med-ready.
I get it. You can make it on the fly. I get it. Okay. Just let you know. The sandfly. All right. Go ahead. Sorry. Couldn't resist.
That's great. That's great. Yeah. You see that macrophage there is absolutely jam-packed with the protozoan. But when we do this, like, for example, this person was in an area where his country had no idea that there was Leishmania there. And he was one of 25 people I saw in one day with different versions of Leishmaniasis. And so now that they know they have Leishmania, moving over to Chagas disease, which I said we have a big problem of. Biggest problem with Chagas is the megaesophagus and megacolon, but more importantly is the cardiac damage that this protozoan can do to the heart. You can see below the gross image of the heart, you can see a whole bunch of the amastigotes inside a heart cell. Okay, so that's one heart cell, and inside that particular heart cell, you have a huge bunch of Chagas amastigotes, and then highlighted underneath, you can see a bigger, higher magnification of amastigotes, and then you see the trichomastigotes that we find in the blood, and I've even found those in cerebral spinal fluid. So even though Chagas is not considered a neurologic problem like its sister, which is African trypanosomiasis, it can cause neurologic problems as well. So it's transmitted by a whole bunch of different reduvid bugs, kissing bugs. They get their name kissing bugs because they like to come onto your face and give you a kiss. And then they turn around and poop on the wound, and that's how you get infected. Yeah. So lovely, lovely critters. This is a fly I found when I was in Zimbabwe, and I was right in the area. If you are in a zone that has African trypanosomiasis, do not wear blue clothing. These flies are attracted to blue clothing. And I remember a family where the father was the only one wearing blue, and he's the only one that ended up with human African trypanosomiasis. So don't wear blue. Okay, wear white. They don't like white for some reason. Okay, so just a little more detail than we need on human African trypanosomiasis. It's not just a blood parasite, even though that's where it's known for. Obviously, it's neurologic. The brain form can be extraordinarily severe. And we divide the clinical manifestations into 3 stages. The first being hemolymphatic, right, where you have big swollen lymph nodes. Classically, Winterbottom sign is a big swollen lymph node in the neck. It does produce a rash. After that, you get into the neurologic phase, which can be horrible, with sleep disorders, tremors, speech disorders, and eventually virtually everybody dies. There is treatment now, but the treatment is still old. We still haven't been able to modify it. It's one of those diseases that we just don't put enough money into because it's not a big problem for the West. It's a big problem if you live in those endemic areas. And so one quick mention of onchocerciasis, only because I spent 10 years of my life working on it in different places in Africa, et cetera. And it's such an interesting disease. It's also known as river blindness. And it's interesting for everybody now because this is the disease that when I was working with colleagues, specifically Dr. Duke, he went to Merck Sharp and Dohme, which was making money hands over fist with ivermectin, treating dire filariasis in dogs as HeartGard, so dog heartworm. And he got it to them to give it to us for free so we could do clinical trials. And that led to the proof that ivermectin is a fantastic drug for river blindness. it happens to suck and not and be useless for COVID. But I think it's always important not to just denigrate a drug because it's being used for the wrong purpose. There can be a correct purpose for these things. Yeah, I'm almost done. Okay, so this is my last thing that I'm going to show you, and I'm only showing it to you for fun because it's one of the rare diseases that's transmitted by eating cockroaches. And you'll probably say to me, I've never eaten a cockroach and I have no intention to. However, when I was in Thailand, they have this fantastic meal called spring beetles, and basically it's a bunch of cockroaches that they roast. But the roasting doesn't kill the larva of these acanthocephalids. And as you can see on the high power view of the head of the worm, it's got this little rotor-rooter. And so that the worm grows and eventually it'll do a rotor-rooter in your intestine and you'll have massive sepsis, and you can die, you do die from these acanthocephalids. So, and I did write a paper on that one time, which I'm sharing because somebody said cockroaches can't vector anything. And I go, let me show you one thing it can vector. And we've had cases of that in Florida, by the way. Little kids eating cockroaches get maniliformis.
Well, the other thing is, in these restaurants, you get from the health department, you get these reports for the cockroaches where, you never know if they did get to the food or not, right? So there's a good point. That's a good point.
Yeah.
But we do have to wrap here, okay, if you don't mind. So thank you very much. So, well, okay, now let me just take this back for us. I mean, this is just a whole bunch of stuff here, and maybe you can even send us your slides if you like. But the most important thing is that one is that we got an expert here in case anybody wants to know that's been doing this for life's work. But two is that we have an increasing number of these things that are going to show up in our laps here, even though they've been mostly in, say, equatorial areas for the most part in the past. We're going to start seeing more and more of this in our areas. We have to become a little bit more familiar because they're insidious. They are not clear cut, and there's these odd symptoms that they may present with, and as best we can, we want to prepare. And then I wanted to know, maybe John, for our folks of us that work in emergency departments and also for EMS, what's the implications for you? And is there anything else you would add to this and to this conversation?
Yeah, I actually think Eileen was an outstanding presentation. A lot of our insights in our report. The answer is the following. It's very similar to what we have when we're in tropical diseases or equatorial. Differential diagnosis for fever markedly accelerates. So that's number one. So our sepsis workup, especially with dengue and encephalitis, really changes the emergency department. From an EMS point of view, outside of protection, there's probably not too much in my mind. It would be helpful, Eileen, to actually like a lot of us emergency physicians, if you need to give us the top five, what you need to worry about. Does that make sense as well?
After and that, for example, does that mean vaccinations or wearing DEET all the time, certain times a year or whatever?
Yeah.
And does DEET have a complication as well, right? But go ahead.
Yeah, actually, for pediatricians, for us, look at the prior dengue virus map of the basically of the United States as well, and for us, that's probably a significant worrisome. The other one is malaria, and the third one, obviously, are the Caribbean nation Zika virus, or chikungunya virus, and all sorts of stuff like that. So I think we need to be very cognizant of basically an emergency medicine perspective of arbovirus type infections and what to do about it. More importantly for the emergency physician is what to work them up, and if there's any basically I would say countermeasures that most of them are supportive to the best of my knowledge, outside of, I would say, vaccine for the and protection for the responders. When I go down to Puerto Rico for my disaster stuff, I wear pyrimethine coated pants and things like that. So I'm very cautious about that. Back to you, Paul.
Yeah. Is there a complication? Can you do too much DEET, right? Okay.
Yeah. If you practice pediatrics, too much DEET can be harmful. I think pyrimethine from a clothing point of view is probably the best protection. Does that make sense as well? And I think For us in Alaska, I tend to wear a coat of basically a mosquito coat and a hoodie on top of that. So going to the bathroom in Alaska is hazardous to your health as well.
Why in Alaska though? Why'd you say
Because
that?
the mosquitoes swarm, and it's really a problem.
Okay, got it. Interesting. And then are there vaccinations out there for anything here that we should be seriously thinking about, or they're not ready for?
Yeah, I'm gonna let Eileen know there's chikungunya Zika virus vaccine, but most of them we don't pay a lot of attention. There are Eileen probably can update me. Dengue virus vaccines the vaccine has been around for at least 10 to 15 years. A lot of that was there's some safety issues and whole nine yards. So Eileen, you want to comment on the current status of vaccines of the big five?
Sure. So for dengue, Sanofi had a vaccine that worked very excellently for type 1, type 3, and type 4, but not excellent for type 2. And that hole made it not ideal. And so there wasn't a lot of uptake. It was accepted for use in the United States by the FDA, but Sanofi has withdrawn it. There is a vaccine that's a Japanese vaccine that's actually better quality than the Sanofi one that also has all four dengue subtypes represented. It has a better action against type 2 dengue. However, it's not available in the US. You have to get it when you get there. The Zika is not approved yet. West Nile, no. There is, of course, there used to be a vaccine for Yersinia pestis. There is now a vaccine. It used to be a poor vaccine for Plasmodium, but by adding much more epitope to these nanoparticles, there's now a very decent vaccine for Plasmodium falciparum. So not all the malarial parasites, but at least the one that, we always said Plasmodium falciparum kills you and the other four make you wish you were dead. So,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah. The other ones I would have to say, I would say yellow fever. If you're going to yellow fever land, definitely get that here as well. And the third one, obviously, would be JEV. Honestly, if you're doing a lot of overseas mission, it's partially effective. In other words, it's not be all to end all. I think it's Japanese in origin. Eileen, correct me if I'm wrong.
Encephalitis virus. The thing of it is, I showed you a photo of the little boy in coma from Japanese encephalitis virus, and it's considered a showstopper disease for the military because it gives you such a horrific headache, right? Even if you don't end up in a coma. But overall, the risk of severe disease and ending up in the ICU is less than 2%. So, but that doesn't mean you wouldn't have a lousy time if you got infected. And I absolutely. Now you talked about mosquito repellents. You talked about DEET. I don't like DEET. It stinks. It messes up my electronics, etc. If you're going to use, besides the what you would put on your clothing, the permethrin, you want to think about picaridin, which is incredibly effective on your skin and even more effective than DEET for ticks. So that's good. It doesn't stink. And you also have to think about IR3535, which is another phenomenal mosquito repellent that some companies sell the IR3535 along with sunscreen. So that's a great deal because you kill two birds with one stone.
Would you do me a favor and put together a list of those things that you just said and then send them over to Jim Augustine? I'll have him send it out to everybody because that'd be good for people to know what those options are. Okay. If you could do like a one paragraph thing, that'd be great. Okay.
Sure.
All right. Well, listen, we got to move on, but thank you, Eileen, as usual, for just knowing all the stuff so we have a reliable resource if something comes up. But I think the points we just made are very important, for a lot of us, especially those who are in the warm zones. But and the hot zones are clearly a problem. But we're going to have more and more hot zones, and the weather is just so crazy nowadays. So hope we get through these things and as I wrote in the invitation that we're seeing greater a lot of the cases, we're seeing a lot more cases in the emergency department than ever before in the past decade, and I suspect it's going to get worse. So All right. Well, with that, Roger, are you ready to go? Roger Stone has been wanting to bring up an issue of the issue about NERF navigation lines, which so many people have been doing in their areas. And but there are issues, especially if you're crossing state lines. And there's, as you see in the invitation, I put red tape. And so, can you just open up the discussion, Roger, and then see if other
Sure.
people have the problem
Sure.
that
Just
you're
was
having?
wondering, if I share my screen, does the slideshow have to be in notes mode, or can you share your screen with it in slide mode?
I have no idea. So try
All right,
it.
I'm going to give it a shot. I'm going to give it a shot. Other people.
Roger, what you have to do is make sure that when you share it, you're sharing the screen and the portion that is in slide mode.
Gotcha. Perfect. Know exactly what to do. Let me try it here. Okay, hang on just a second. Screen 2, screen. Here it is. Boom. Hey, are you seeing just the slide?
Ben Launer, are you on? We're just coming up. It looks like it's starting. Yeah, it's there.
Yes, I am.
Ben,
Hey,
Ben, you're on. Yeah, because you may want to make some commentary and see if Rob Dunn is on yet. He was going to try to get on. He had other things to do. So okay, but no.
Yeah.
Can
you guys hear me?
Anybody else?
Can you guys hear me? Okay.
Yes, we can. So go ahead and hit it.
And can you see the screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. So just to let you guys know, this is just a title slide and 5 slides to sort of set the stage. So the context of my questions, raising the questions for the group, is from the position of us being, as I do a lot of parody on songs, being the Johnny Come Lately, the new kids in town, if we're contemplating from scratch a 911 nurse navigation system.
Wasn't that done by some group called the Eagles?
Eagles, exactly correct. That was part of the reason. So yeah, I also just wrote a
Double
parody.
entendre here. Okay, go ahead. Okay.
I just wrote a QA parody on the tune Just Once by James Ingram when it comes to QA. So anyway, for this, I would be remiss if I didn't at least mention my leadership colleagues who have been joining me over the years to try over multi-year endeavor to stratify and divert appropriate subgroups of patients maybe out of the ED. And Tony Scott will be rotationally with me at Thursday, Friday, first year of the scare. And Ben and Pete had joined me last year. So shout out to them, because without them, I cannot succeed for sure. This quick, just one slide recap will give some insight into the 4 questions I'll ask at the very end of my 5th slide. When it comes to nurse navigation, I think it's helpful to know for those folks who may not know us that we're Maryland's largest EMS jurisdiction, one of 2 right there by Washington, D.C., about 1 million residents and about 100,000 people who commute in during the daytime. We've been on pace for about 115,000 EMS calls, 77,000 transports. And it's worthy of note that, like many other systems are reporting demographically, that their increases in call volume have vastly outpaced the 10% population growth that's in our case over the past 15 years. We keep getting more and more calls, in a vastly outpacing way. So that means that we can't just keep adding ambulances and adding staff. That's already hard to recruit and retain. And so the barriers to just, grow, having ambulances grow with the call volume, can't be the ultimate, only remedy. In addition, we have receiving facilities that sort of struggle for all the reasons we've talked about to keep up with the ED census that we already have. And above that, adding to the above, is it doesn't help that we're losing our only freestanding emergency department in the county, which is in the middle of a really jam-packed Germantown population. So we'll have to redistribute something just under 3% of our patients. But moreover, some of those patients who used to be able to walk to the GEC, the Germantown Emergency Center, may be people that add to the future 911 census. So this graphic just shows that through this increasing call volume, the proportion of the different acuity levels doesn't really change much, with the red color showing that time-dependent emergencies, the ones we send 2 medics to. Yellow is your traditional soft ALS dispatch, and that leaves that green color that corresponds to the 54 to 61% of our BLS dispatches, and that would be the population from which we would draw a subgroup that would be helped by the nurse navigation population. So I think further context I could provide for you that kind of underscores our search for remedies are the things we've tried over the years to divert patients out of the ED, either after a response occurs, or maybe before the 911 call occurs, or between recidivist calls by high 911 utilizers. So this includes trying the alternate destination program either within or outside the shell of ET3. And you all probably know that ET3 had to hit the skids at the end of 2023. Of note that the telehealth program we had in place was not sustainable from a financial or staffing standpoint beyond a courtesy period of time, during which we were piggybacking on a prison telehealth program that was being provided by Adventist Health. So we were lucky to be able to have it, but it was not going to last forever. We've also tried this direct to triage program, which we presented at NAMSB 2024 and then 25 as a poster. And that is essentially, bypassed the wall. And it was met with limited success, even a poster we put out for that, but it's clearly underutilized or not, an in of itself remedy. And then finally, we've had about a decade of an MIH program. Each of these bullets could be an hour lecture themselves, but it's essentially very successful in a limited way using a care coordination model and using a sub-model that also speaks to behavioral health advocacy. We're only in our infancy when it comes to addictions management, like Dave's program in San Antonio. And then finally, we've published some limited success on our transportation destination officer, which is our EMS duty officers rotationally on duty 12 hours a day, providing load balancing, distributing our ambulances to ERs in real time as they know how busy they are. And then also, transportation management reminders like, hey, did your patient, is it a repatriation to another hospital? Did you ask them if they've just been discharged? Did you ask them if they're a postpartum patient, et cetera? So the bottom line is those efforts have yielded essentially a glass half empty, which we're glad that we investigated, but it clearly is not the panacea that we've been able to find. Certainly ET3 wasn't. And I wasn't able to get it because Dr. Delbridge actually had a power outage like Aileen had last week, but he was going to send me a slide that he presented on April 8th for our medical director symposium in Maryland that showed that there were 82 people that were diverted to urgent care as part of an ATD program in 2025, but there were 10,300 that were taken out of an urgent care by 911 municipal services, which means that for every patient we can get into an urgent care, we have to take 99 out.
So Roger, let me interrupt you for a second. Ben, you had your hand up. Did you withdraw, or do you want to still say something?
Yeah.
No, I'll wait till he's done. No problem.
Yeah, this is actually, so I was about to say, so as this leaves us as I land the plane with diversion programs that occur after the 911 call, but before a response is sent. So that's the classification we're talking about. We've had early discussions last decade about the Medical Priority Dispatch's ECNS system, but this was pre-accreditation. You had to be accredited, and we didn't achieve that until after the pandemic. And it was not financially or logistically feasible as we investigated. We've seen colleagues present their newer successful programs at national meetings, particularly Dr. Holman at Eagles and NAMSP. So I point to the fact that the EMS docs in Maryland are carefully watching Ben's program in Baltimore. We're looking to see the data using global medical response for their data and then subsequent successes. We understand that this model uses a bundle of BLS as a package deal that has a cost associated, and that's something Ben can go into more detail. And there are certainly others out there. We've spoken to the existence of those that don't have a transportation piece, like Crosswalk Health. Crosswalk Health that helps keep certain patients at home by coordinating follow-up care without the transportation commitment. So this leads to the questions that I, asked to the group, either mature users versus those of us that are contemplating, nurse navigation systems. I think you first have to know, is your dispatch center bound by a subset of regs that govern EMS in your state, or is it completely independent? For the nurse models involving national vendors that are literally operating across states, does your state have a licensing rec for the individual nurses that might be used? Does each state facilitate or hamper insurer-payer arrangements for potential vendors? Because as I mentioned, the sustainability financially is big, and a lot of times these vendors have to work across multiple customers to get the volume they need to stay paid and afloat. And is that something that's hampered or helped by your state? And then what are the general, this is sort of an open-ended question, what are the dead-end barriers that plague some of us to implement these navigation models? So with that, for the new kids in town, I'm asking, what can some of the Eagles learn from others? And I'll toss it to Ben to give us perspective as a, quote, not so new kid in town. And with that, I have to figure out how to unshare. Let me see here if I can unshare.
Well, in the
Remove.
meantime,
Yeah,
go
okay,
ahead.
good. Thanks for doing that.
Got it.
Yeah. So this is where I toss it to Ben.
Well, go ahead. Go ahead, Paul, if you wanted to mention something. I didn't.
Oh, I just said it's pitch to Ben. I mean, while he was doing that, that's all.
Oh, yeah. Well, so first of all, I will, I'm happy to share whatever data I have. We try not to keep secrets. I've learned a lot from the Eagles. And obviously I want to caveat this by saying, I'm only suggesting, right? It's funny. I don't make policies, but this is, I think, one of the few successes that we have here. Similar to Roger, all of these challenges. We have a strained system. Our hospitals are at capacity. I say 30 ambulances, but I can't even staff the 30 ambulances that we have. When GMR came in, they asked us, they said, well, can you define your condition zero? And what was interesting is that if you look at this particular chart, our condition zero was pretty much every day. So unlike other systems, Baltimore City does not have, with the exception of maybe an intermittent minute here or there, where we don't have any people to deploy. Now, we are not an accredited dispatch center. We use ProQA, which is one of their requirements. So just very basically, we basically said whatever you want to divert, because they have their own nurses and their own medical director, we allow them to divert. We have about 33 determinants. They do not divert pregnancy cases. They do not divert skilled nursing facilities, and they do not divert dialysis patients. They will divert pediatrics and whatever else. This is an example of our process. And I want to point out with this is that this is just the Baltimore program. Now, AMR and GMR, as Roger said, have a very clear-cut practice where if you want them to give you the suite, I'm not saying they won't negotiate, but they basically say, for this to work, you need to have a cohort of ambulances to actually do non-emergent stuff, and you need to have contracts with Uber List. They will set all that up for you. So our process is it comes in, and if the CAD will pop up, if it's one of the 33 determinants, it'll say NN, and then they call a nurse navigator, and the nurse navigator does their thing. This is what the data look like. Now, this is a 14-day snapshot as of 2 weeks ago. We've diverted over about 5,000 to 6,000 calls since the inception of this program. And essentially what we measure
when was that? 5,000 or 6,000 over what period of time? When did you start?
Started in October or September, October, and I'll give you the total. I'll give you the total a little bit later.
I mean, that's a lot then. That's great. Okay, go ahead.
Well,
I just wanted to get the idea of the time frame.
The problem is, I think that the best case scenario in this, as we'll show you, is that for a variety of reasons, of the ones that go through NurseNav, you successfully divert about 25% of those. So if the metric is how many go to NurseNav, that's different. But really what is diverted is a smaller subset. And the question is, is that worth it? So this talks to you about year to date, and this is what I was talking about. So we have, and I apologize, 2,200 calls. This is year to date. We've done a little bit more than that since September, but you can see essentially that is a steady benchmark. So if you look at from January to now, about 522 of them do not touch the EMS system. And I want to say that we think of this as diversion, but it really is more appropriately care linkage, right? Because a lot of these patients are calling because they either think they have a life threat or they need to go somewhere else. And so from January to now, you can see, and that number is now higher because I last ran this data a couple of weeks ago, they can go to anywhere from a non-emergent BLS, self-care, RelyMD, which is their contractor for Tele 911, because you do this in the front end. I would respectfully report that once the ambulance goes emergently, it is almost a done deal. To Roger's point, it is very difficult to go through protocols and substitute workflows and let paramedics say, well, let's talk to a stabilization center. Our stabilization center has been very similarly not successful with respect to the metric of diversion. However, if you get them on the front end and you ascertain what the need is, and you're able to go outside of the ProQA kind of script and you go into the ECNS or emergency care nurse protocol, there's a lot of other options. And that slide just shows you basically where we're going. And we constantly are adding jurisdictions. So some go to RelyMD, some go to urgent care, some go to hospitals via non-emergent BLS. And then there's also, we have regular meetings with QA. So this is not just a one and done. This is a situation in which we're constantly meeting with them to see, number one, are they calling back? What are the reasons why they call? and what's the average callback score. And I just want to say that this is not a all-in-one solution. We all know and appreciate how truly complex EMS is. And Baltimore City, I wish we were clinically ahead of the game as many other services are, but one of the things we do is the city council here gets this. They get the idea that we can no longer add ambulances and how we can repurpose money. So when you say, how do we do things non-emergently? How do we get people to other care locations? That's where the conversation, I think, has a lot of positivity. So we are doing behavioral health 911. NurseNav is one component of this. We have telemedicine on the back end, but by and large, I would argue that the nurse navigation is the most successful, because we've not had another situation where 25% is about the highest that we've seen in terms of things that go completely away from the EMS system. I think there's other ways to kind of improve that metric, but that's kind of a state-of-the-art, very rapid summary of what the Baltimore City NurseNav program is doing today.
Do either of you, could you tell us, how does that differ from what the presentation we had from David Purse with his, what was it called, the Ethan program? Are you familiar with that? And is there some differences? That's the first thing. And then the second question I have is, you had raised the issue about cross jurisdictions, like different states and all that. You talked about, Roger, but let's start off with the question about Ethan. How is this different? Or does anybody know? I wish David was here.
The Ethan program, from what I know about it, and I'm sure there's a lot of people, there's a lot of people here that will obviously talk about what happened in terms of that grant, but I know there was alternative destinations and telehealth. So I can't speak to any degree of detail with it.
Oh, that's fine.
But,
all right. Well, we could bring this up as well at our meeting later on, because this is a point of interest. But you had brought up some issue about regulatory problems. Are you familiar with that, Ben or Roger? You want to take that?
So one of the things that we ran across for the model of post-response telehealth is that our telehealth clinicians needed to be, fell under, since it was a post-response phenomenon, it fell under a requirement that these, for better for worse, these clinicians were providing what's called online medical direction. So there was a requirement that physician has to be licensed in Maryland and have been trained in our base station, initial and continuing medical education on our protocols. So that's beforehand. Now the issue of a nurse navigator, if there's a separation and it's a pre-response issue, and there isn't a tight linkage between the state's regulatory jurisdiction over a dispatch center, the internal dispatch center sending a call to a clinician out of state may not be on the hook for that state to require the same thing they did for the telehealth folks that were doing minor definitive care now on the scene, or saying that patient can Uber over to an urgent care or whatever advice they were giving. So that's one of the reasons I asked my first question about the regulatory standards even involving the dispatch center.
Okay. So. We're gonna have to wrap here soon, but Rob Lowe, you're getting ready to start a program. Do you have a question or a comment?
I think more of a comment. A couple of things. To Roger's point, if you're signing up with a national organization, they'll license the nurses in your state. And then the telehealth things come down to kind of your state requirements too, as far as who can essentially practice telehealth. And so they'll lean a lot into your local resources for that reason. So we've been doing a lot of work about standing up our local folks to be referrals, even though that referral center is out of state. I think Ben raises probably the biggest point, and the thing that sold it the most in our community is we went at this from a fairness and equality standpoint, which is it may not be fair to some of our most disenfranchised patients to constantly send them to the most expensive healthcare option we had. And that's really what got us the traction in the city. And the city likes to talk about decreasing runs, but that's a hard thing to stand up in front of folks. It's a little bit harder for us because we give away about 20% of our runs to our suburbs. And so I've been very careful to tell folks, we may not see a run reduction at all. In fact, we might see an increase in ALS transports because we may end up clawing back some of the runs that we're now home for, that we were out on some other call and shunted to one of our mutual aid partners. So
Very well said.
You're saying, Ben, you were shaking your head, right? So you agree with that, then?
100%, because the better you do, the more success you're going to have. And this was made by Bitburg. So, but this is the way I look at it, because if you're going to, what drives me nuts, and opposed to many things in Baltimore City, is we say, we got to run ambulances, we got to educate people. We know that no matter how much education you do, everybody's going to call. I think the real thing we have to deal with here is, as you mentioned, is what's the quality situation? How do we get the right resource to the right patient at the right time? And how do we control what we can control? Meaning, shame on us if we're sending an emergent fire suppression unit every single time for a unit that doesn't need it. Now, that relies heavily upon the ECN protocol, which is also good, but I totally agree. The volumes do not decrease unless your population goes down, at least in our or in DC's program.
It was all I remember we were having, just if you build a good program, they will come, so to speak, right? For example, when I first got to Parkland, we were seeing, I don't know, 300-400 patients a day, and then a lot of them left because they were waiting on them. We fixed it up and got things going. Next thing you know is we have 950 patients a day, right, Ray? Remember when that happened? We fixed all that. So yeah, it's the same kind of concept, I guess. So, all right.
So I did have a question back to Rob, and because the services would provide 24/7, 365 theoretic coverage. Each of these national places is able to make sure that each and every nurse that's signed up and working full-time or part-time has that many licenses across all the states that are their customers. And is that something that's sustainable, that they can guarantee that the person on duty, no matter who their customer is that rings down the phone, that they're going to be jumping through those hoops depending on the state that has those regulatory requirements? Is that your understanding, Rob, when you were sold?
Yeah, obviously I don't know their business or staffing model and how many of those are multi-jurisdictional licenses, but the guarantee to us is that they would be practitioners and licensed within our state. So, and in addition, when they get the transfer from us, it'll pop up, where it's coming from and the protocol that we've been involved in helping them develop. So it immediately on their screen, they know they're dealing with Columbus.
And then the other question is, has anybody else in the group, may be relatively small, but if it were larger, if we put the question, is anybody running into some dead end barriers where they haven't been able to overcome the barriers that they have in order to implement it? Yet.
So I have one potential looming barrier, and we'll just see how this plays out. We anticipate labor may have an issue because it's come up before about whether or not that can be diverted to a Lyft or an Uber. But at the end of the day, even if I put a firefighter in a van and drive him around as a Columbus Fire Uber, I still think we're doing better care.
Do they call it Ambulette 1?
So we haven't gotten there yet. We anticipate this being something as we launch. But honestly, our initial launch is hopefully a month or two away. And we're going to deal a lot with telehealth and clinics, leverage a lot of our residency programs and things like that. So,
and then one thing, Ben, isn't it our understanding that if it's for nurse navigation, that there is no MIMS jurisdiction over their licensure requirements if it happens before EMS is ever dispatched? Is my understanding, which is an advantage.
These are all dispatch protocols. There's no yes. The nurses are I think they're in Phoenix.
Okay.
All right. Okay. So listen, it's obviously time to wrap up, but is anybody else on the call altogether, just generally have anything else they want to pipe in about? I'm sorry we didn't get to go around the room today. We'll make up for that next week maybe. And but anybody else want to make a comment here or add into anything here?
Great discussion. Eileen, great job, by the way.
Thank you.
Eileen, by the way, good job. Okay, good. Thanks.
That's right. Well, no, that was a great discussion.
Yeah. Well,
not knowing how much time we would need, I was going to tell Eileen that her talk gave me a flashback to both medical school, where we were heavily tested in parasite medicine. And I remember I like to write musical parodies. I remember writing something in Follies that had something with Onchocerca volvularis, etc.
Yeah.
And then even further back in life, single digit age, my dad being an NIH immunologist, when he first said the word tsetse fly about African American sleeping sickness, I was like, tsetse fly. I thought it was the funniest name for a bug, even way back then. So that's a 50-plus-year-old memory. And then finally, Julian, are you learning about tsetse flies, and are you being heavily tested on Onchocerca volvularis in medical school?
Better.
I want to shout out to Julian, say hi, and ask him.
Yeah, no, I did well on my exam. I had 3 weeks ago on my exam.
Yeah, I have to say, I was Ray. You remember when we did the thing where I went out to see what they were doing in the or medical screening exam area, and that guy come in and he said, "Why are you coming in?" And he said, "I think I'm losing sight in the other eye." And he was a 32-year-old guy, and they said, "I have glaucoma," and I said, "Huh." 32-year-old guy. I said, so it turns out that I said, "Where's your accent from?" And he goes, "Nigeria." And I go, "Oh, we're in Nigeria." The bottom line was that they had measured him as having high pressures in his eyes, so they're just treating him for that. And I guess whoever it was on the ophthalmology department had never known about Onchocerca volvulus, right? So it's just so it's really great that you're still getting this, Julian, in school, because it's so important. It really is.
Hey, Paul, phone me in some doxycycline, will you? I would appreciate it.
Okay.
If you ever want to diagnose microfilaria in the eye by direct ophthalmoscopy, what you do is you ask the person to hold their head down for about a minute. Then they pop it up, and all the little worms are visible, floating around in the vitreous fluid.
Golly. All right.
Awesome.
Well, listen, we better get rocking here, okay? Unless there's something real critical, I just want to then say, please let me know right now. But let's move on and welcome back, my friends. The show then never ends next week. It'll be May 1st, by the way, just so you know, and we'll see you in May.
Dr. Malloy, real quick, Mick, the chief that was with us at Eagles, Pete Dugan, just went on a fire department vacation in Ireland, and all of his descriptions of his last week have made me definitely add, sort of underscore my visit to Ireland someday to put on my bucket list. And if we do that, you're going to be one of the first people I call.
And Doug Kupas, I met with Phil Moy this week, and we're talking about that subject you and I were discussing, the leaving the endowment to the organization. So we're working on it.
Yeah,
sorry to bring it up, but I'm just letting you know. I saw you there, so
I was gonna try. I got to figure out how you turn off the recording here, right? Because
thanks for the card, Doug. By the way, that was very sweet. I appreciate it.
Stop recording. Yeah.